Welcome to PHP Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're here for another Monday mini-sode.
Yes, our Monday mini-sodes, we love them because they're our opportunity to kind of dive into one thing for a shorter amount of time, 10 to 15 minutes. And let's be honest, that's all of the attention span most of us have today anyways. But if you are interested in longer form content, we have long content. Every single Wednesday, we drop a podcast. You can get it on YouTube, or you can get it anywhere you're listening to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Google Cast, any of those places. And we talk about all kinds of different stuff. But today, look, here's the deal. Things go wrong on eBay. You messed up an order. A customer has lost their mind and is like accusing you of something, and you're getting a negative feedback you don't deserve. Something has happened and you've got to get this resolved. And one of the things that we talk a lot about on PHP Podcast is eBay's willingness to work with you if you go through the right channels, you do the right things. And one of the things that you should do if it's required is the phone call. And we want to talk about today, when you call eBay, what are the best ways to make sure that you get that negative feedback removed, that you get the situation resolved in your favor, instead of the things that a lot of times people will do, and they'll mess up the phone call and they'll make things worse for themselves. So today we're going to be talking about the top tips to make sure your phone call to eBay goes well.
So before we get started, I want to make sure people understand calling should be only a last resort. Before you do anything, you need to try to resolve things with the buyer, because that's going to be the very first question they're going to ask. They're going to say, did you message the buyer? They're also going to ask you offer returns. So maybe sometimes you need to make sure you offer a return. They're going to ask, when you spoke with the buyer, did you go over what was in the listing? Like, they're going to ask something related to the buyer. So you got to make sure, don't call every time. We've talked about this a lot. Mike has brought in his experience with DirecTV back in the day, how companies track how many times people call. And so if it seems like you're somebody that just calls about anything, I hear people all the time on social media like, eBay needs to know about this, I'm going to call them. And eBay, generally, they don't want you to call about something you're upset about if it's something that you could have resolved yourself. And so only call if it's the last resort. If you've messaged the buyer, you offered a return, you did an adjustment, whatever it is, and things still didn't work out, then it's time to call eBay. Don't make it your first instinct to call eBay. I know a lot of people want to make it their first instinct. It can't be. It can't be. And in the end, it doesn't make you look good if you're always calling all the time.
Yeah, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf, right? Or like, I've got a couple of kids, and I've got 3 of them, and 2 of them are at that age where they'll tattle on each other. And if they tattle all the time, if one of them's always telling, you're kind of like, you almost zone out whatever they're telling you. But if they never come and tell you anything, and then all of a sudden they come and say, hey mom, this happened, you're going to be paying attention. It's the same thing with eBay, right? Like, if you're calling as a last resort, it's much more likely that they're going to be interested in what you have to say, as opposed to like, oh, here comes Mike again calling us for the 100th time this month, right? So yeah, last resort is good. And you want to try and resolve as much as you can with the buyer first, right? Because sometimes even you can actually kind of resolve the situation completely with the buyer, and then it's just a matter of calling eBay to get the negative feedback off if the buyer doesn't know how to do it, or to remove a defect if there was some defect of some kind, maybe a late shipment or something like that you were able to get resolved with the buyer. And if you've got all of those ducks in a line right off the bat, you're going to be in a much better place. Hey, I contacted the buyer, here's what the arrangement we came to, or we resolved it. Or sometimes you can't resolve the situation with the buyer, but if you can show, and they're going to pull up the message history. They're going to see when the buyer opened up a case, when you contacted them back. They're going to look at all of those things. And so if in those messages, it's very clear that you were the one trying to be professional, you were being polite, you were doing everything in your power. Hey, I offered a return. I offered to give them a partial refund because it didn't fit, but, or whatever the situation was, you explain, here are the steps I took with the buyer first. eBay is going to be much more likely to resolve the situation with you in a way that's going to help your store, not affect you negatively in the algorithm and all of those things. So make sure to do as much as you can with the buyer. And there's times where you can't, where the buyer is just silent, you're not getting anything. But even then, you've got that, hey, hey, I reached out to the buyer 3 times in the last week since this situation. I haven't heard anything back, so I'm calling you hoping that we can deal with this. So get as much done on your end as you can before making that phone call.
Agreed. Now, when you do make that phone call, okay, you got to play it cool. You got to be friendly. You got to be nice. I know we get heated sometimes, right? And you know, there's a lot of reasons to be upset with eBay, okay? But you can't funnel all your grievances into one phone call, right? If it takes you, maybe you got to go for a walk before you call eBay. Maybe, you got to get your favorite drink. I'm talking about Diet Mountain Dew for me. But whatever it is, something to mellow you out before you call, it's better that way. There's that old adage, it's better you attract more flies with honey, right? And that's what you're trying to do here, right? And depending on who you're talking to, you don't know what that person is going. They're human. If they're having a rough day and somebody goes, I'm calling you because I can't believe what you guys are doing. You guys need to resolve and take care of this for me. The person can be like, okay, no. And they may not directly tell you no, but in their mind, you've already lost. They're going to listen to you. They're going to placate you. And then they're not going to do anything for you. But if you approach, I do this all the time. I'll call and go, they usually do like, hey, thank you so much for being with eBay for the last, 12 years. Appreciate, your continued loyalty, whatever it is. Then I go, hey, thanks so much. Hey, how's your day? How's things going? And it's, it sounds weird when, you're telling me to have a conversation with the eBay rep. I'm telling you, yes, have that conversation because you never know. Right. And so, I'll put my, late night DJ voice. I'm like, hey, how's things going? How you doing? And they're like, oh, calls have been crazy, blah, blah. Especially when sometimes they'll tell me like things have been wild and crazy. You don't want to add to the crazy because they're going to treat you just like everybody else, right? You want to stand out. You want to seem like the guy. And this kind of goes for anybody you call. If you got a late bill or you got an incorrect bill or you have, whatever it is that you got to resolve. I've always found that when I start off the conversation friendly, and I'm friendly the whole way through, which is really tough, right? Because sometimes they'll tell you no, and you want to go like, well, you know what? I want to talk to your supervisor. I want to da-da-da. Don't go there yet. Go, hey, listen, I understand what you're telling me, but sometimes mistakes happen or whatever takes place. Is there a way that we can still come to a resolution here? And then that's when you go, if they say, no, I'm sorry, sir. Hey, you know what? I appreciate you helping me. Is there somebody else that can help? And that ends up leading you down a better road. Don't demand. At first, begin to ask, hey, is there a way we could resolve this? Does that make sense, Mike, what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's good. I think that that covers it. I mean, there comes a point. I read a book by a guy. It was pretty interesting. It had a lot of stuff that don't necessarily recommend, but one of the things, the story in there that was like always stuck out to me was this idea of like, it is demanding, but in a way that's like appropriate as far as here's what I'm expecting to happen. Like, this is how we're going to resolve this. And if you're kind of insistent on it, and if it's a serious situation that's going to help you, like, here's what I need. And the story that kind of stuck out with me was like somebody got their order messed up with like meat that they ordered from a butcher. The person just learned, instead of just saying, oh, okay, and then leaving and not getting their meat, is like, okay, thanks. I want my meat. And they're like, oh, sorry, like we don't have it. Okay, that's great. But I want my meat. I paid for my meat. I want my, and then you just keep going. It's like, okay, here it is. So there does come a place where you kind of have to push a little bit. But yeah, you definitely don't want to start with saying like, take this off, take this negative feedback off, and start demanding right off the bat. That's not a way. That's not going to win you friends. But yeah, asking like, is there anything we can do about this? Or even saying like, would you be able to remove the negative feedback if we're able to and by doing that, you're going to be in a much better place by asking, or even asking, like we've talked about in previous books reviews we've done with like getting them to say no. Like, is there anything stopping us from removing this negative feedback? And if they, then if they say something like, well, it's a policy that, and then they try and explain it to you, then you can push a little further. But a lot of times they'll be like, well, no. And then you go from there. So yeah, you can ask those questions. You could basically be implying what it is you're expecting and want without demanding and saying, take this off now. Take this off, or I'm talking to your supervisor. that's really not going to be the best way to do things.
One of the craziest meetings I had when I was a school administrator, I had this guy who was a closer, like he did sales, and he was good. And he wanted me to make an exception for his daughter on something. And he came in there, he was smiling, he shook my hand. I mean, this is the first time I realized the power of friendliness, and did exactly what you said. So at the end, he goes, he didn't give me a way out. He's like, hey, listen, what we can do is you can do this or you can do this. And both options were what he wanted. And so I had to choose which one. And yeah, he won. He got what he wanted. Right. And he did it in a friendly way. He did the whole, like, is what's stopping you? And I couldn't find anything that was stopping me from making the decision that he wanted. And so sure enough, got his way. So yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. All right. This other one, this is when you're trying to build yourself a defense, because sometimes people don't realize things. If you go, for example, today I had a pair of cowboy boots got returned to me torn. Like, I don't even know how they were torn. There's some nice Tony Llamas. They were ripped. And the buyer was like, first day I put these on, these things ripped. And I'm like, there's no way this happened. Like, they must have fallen off a horse and the spur hit it. I don't know what happened. And so I call and I'm like, hey, listen, I understand, I have the ability to give a 50% return. I'm a top rated seller. But here's the deal. I always offer people full returns. I even do full returns plus shipping, even though I paid for the return shipping. I have 100% feedback. If you look at all my feedback that people have taken the time to write, they always talk about how I package things well. Things, arrive better than they were in the pictures. I always want to make business with this person again. I know some of them are boilerplate responses, but still, you can still point to it. And I go, so what I'm asking this time is, I can't sell these boots anymore. And so the 50% doesn't even help me out. Is there anything I can do here? And he's like, hold on just a second. Let me get back to you. And sure enough, he got back to me. He's like, hey, listen, we're going to take care of this refund for you. It's not going to come out of your balance. Appreciate, the fact that you always take care of customers. And sure enough, I didn't lose any money on it. And so it helps sometimes to remind, in a nice way, not in an arrogant, not, in a humble brag kind of way, to let the rep know this is why I think it would benefit you to help me, because I've always gone out of my way to look for the interest of eBay, even when it costs me. And it works a lot of the time. So just that's my recommendation.
Yeah, right. No, that's good. And then on top of that, which, like you said, oftentimes works. But here's the thing. People often give up way too early. Like, have you ever seen that meme of like the person who's like digging, and then they give up. Yes. And then like the gold mine is like, or the diamond mine is like 2 feet away from where they stopped. I feel like it's cheesy, but there's times where that's realistic, in the sense that, like, you do all this legwork. You've got all your information. You did all the legwork with the customer. You call the first rep you talk to. They don't help you. Maybe they're having a bad day. They don't want to resolve the situation. And you get off the phone and you go, well, that's it. I didn't get anywhere with that one. It doesn't hurt to call again. I mean, our experience is, majority of the time, if you did all these things, right? Like, we have some people say, hey, I called eBay and they didn't help me out. And it was the seller's fault. Like, they didn't do these things. They were rude. They were mean. And then there's times where they did everything right. They tried to work it out with the customer. They weren't at fault. They were kind, all of that. And for whatever reason, eBay still didn't side with them. But you can't give up then. Try again. It does not hurt to try again. It doesn't hurt to call back, and you'll get a different rep. And you never know, the next rep might just understand the way you're explaining the situation a little bit better. They're able to connect with it. Maybe they have a little bit more authority. Maybe they've been there longer. That's some of it too. Like, if somebody's brand new, they've only been there a few months, they hear this story, they're going just by the books. And it's like, well, the paper says this, and so I'm going to do this. Versus the person who's been there for a long time might be like, oh yeah, we deal with these all the time. Let me just take it off for you. I know it's fine. So you never know who you get, why they made the decision they made. So it doesn't hurt to try again. Of course, it comes to a point, if you've talked to 4 or 5 reps and you're getting the same answer every time, then it might just be there's nothing that can be done about it. But don't give up on the first try. And in fact, if they say there's nothing they can do, kind of going back to that don't demand, At that point, you do kind of maybe just say like, okay, can I speak to somebody, maybe a little bit higher up on this one? Again, you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to scream, let me talk to your manager. You can just say like, if they say they can't make that decision, but great. Is there somebody maybe there who has the ability to make a decision like this? And again, then you're not blaming them. You're not saying like, you're dumb or you're this for not being able. You're just saying, hey, I understand you can't make this decision. You don't have the authority. Is there somebody there who does have the authority that can maybe hear out my story? That it's very helpful. So don't give up the first call. Try calling a second time or asking to speak to somebody a little bit higher up.
Yeah, and I've had it, where the third time was when things got resolved. My thing is rule of 3. Like you should at least try to call 3 different times. Because I've had it too, where by the 4th or 5th time, they're like, hey, we have your notes. We know you've called. There's nothing more we can do. Right. But you want to keep going until you hit that wall and there's nothing else you can do. So, hey, hopefully this helped many of you have successful phone calls. If for a reason, you listen to this mini-sode and weeks, months down the road, you followed our advice and it helped, come on back and let us know in the comments. We still see the older comments. We really would appreciate that. Our goal here is to document our journey. And in the end, while we're documenting, we're helping all of you. With that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling late.
Peace.